Sheesh! The National Museum of Natural History, that's solid, pare. Like, what a nice way to relax after the SEM, right?
Titigil ka ba ever sa pagsasalita ng ganyan?
Uy, grabe, pagbigyan mo naman ako. Like, after ko buhatin you sa mga group works natin.
Ikaw nang bubuhat? Naku po, baka ibang universe sa multiverse yarn.
Bahala ka na nga dyan. Let's go, Orb. Pasok na as. Look oh, wala pang pila.
Hala, ang ganda. Parang first time ko pumunta dito after nilang magpa-renovate.
Sheesh! Oo nga eh. Uy, tara, let's go dun sa aquatic parts. Na-miss ko yung parang submarine eh.
Saang floor ba yan?
That I don't know eh, pare. But, we'll find our way naman siguro, bro. Like, ito na ba yun?
Parang hindi pa ata. Freshwater to eh. Uy, tignan mo, Lake Poway.
Uy, grabe ang angas ng mga diorama nila. Parang I want to make one of UST ah. Tapos yung magiging Lake UST pag nagbaha.
Uy, bahala ka nga dyan. Iikot ako ah.
Uy, teka.
Uy, ang cool oh.
Sheesh! Endemism? Parang I have like trauma of that na eh from one of our previous sems. Anong subject nga ba ulit yun?
Uy, ano yun? May parang bagong display sila dun oh.
Yo! That's like nakakasilaw, bro. Pero bakit parang nakakaiba ang design? Teka, I'll look at it.
Huy, sure ka ba na pwede nang pumasok? Baka mamaya.
Sheesh! Pare, ako bahala sa'yo. Don't worry about it. Yo! This looks so lit, pare. It looks like something out of Tron.
Hay, nakakahiya ka talagang kasama. Pero di bale, masaya naman eh.
Ayo, I think we have to enter here, bro. And look, there's a pair of VR goggles. You want to make una?
Sa pagsasalita mong iyan, bahala ka dyan, mauna ka na.
Okay, sabi mo ah.
Welcome to Lake Strange, a project of the Philippine National Museum. Please wait while the system boots. Lake Strange is a virtual reality presentation that showcases an artificial freshwater system. Originally envisioned by Dr. Richards and funded by the Stark Foundation and the Xavier Foundation, this lake is a secluded water reserve that functions as an educational tool for you, viewers, to learn more about the life and beauty of the lakes and rivers of your country and the world. Found around the area are artificially intelligent camera systems that locate, track, and record the organisms of Lake Strange. If the light on the upper left flashes green, it means you can see all these creatures live. Organisms have been filled into these freshwater bodies from various parts around the world by its namesake, Doctor Strange. The local planning, coordination, and oversight of this project was led by the Philippines' own Dr. Robredo and Dr. Pangilinan for the Philippine National Museum. The voices that you will hear and faces you will see in this presentation are from the research assistants of the museum. Welcome to Lake Strange. Select your learning category.
So we all know what viruses are, especially with the ongoing pandemic that we are in. We know that these are present in the air, different surfaces, and also present in lakes. We can find viruses such as hepatitis A, poliovirus, astrovirus, and Coxsackie virus. Their abundance increases with ecosystem productivity. This would mean that ponds and lakes would have increased viral particles in eutrophied areas. Not only that, viral abundance can significantly be higher in deeper waters than on surfaces. During the winter, however, there would be a significant decline in the amount of viral particles in the body of water. Viruses have this adaptation strategy which would allow them to persist during unideal conditions in aquatic environments. This is usually triggered when there are insufficient host cells to permit production or reproduction by new infection and immediate viral lysis. Their interaction to the ecosystem greatly affects the composition of the bacterial community through constraining the abundance of most of the abundant bacterial groups to lessen their competition for substrate resources. We move on to the domain of Archaea. Generally, these are single-celled organisms with no nucleus or organelles. They are common in all environments, but in freshwater environments, they only constitute 10% of the microbial population. Methanogens, as they are called, undergo methanogenesis. This is a process that generates methane, which is a greenhouse gas. This is the last step in the process of anaerobic degradation of organic carbon. This brings me to my next domain, bacteria, which are also single-celled organisms. These microbes have 34 species clusters which are found exclusively in freshwater systems. I'm sure that by now you're all familiar with cyanobacteria, which are photosynthetic bacteria that have an extreme impact in water quality. Cyanobacteria is dubbed as the blue-green algae that we see in algal blooms. Benthic species of these inhabit upstreams, temporary waters, and as well as wetlands. An abundance of their presence can render the lake useless for swimming. They also have the ability to use green light, which would allow them to inhabit deeper waters but still remain photosynthetically active. They have gelatinous coatings and they have the ability to produce toxins that make them difficult to be consumed by predators. They also synthesize compounds which create a musty flavor and odor to the water, which would also affect the taste of fishes. They modify zooplankton assemblages and interfere with the growth of fishes and amphibians. Pretty problematic, right?
Let us move on to the domain Eukarya. Eukaryotic algae are found in all freshwater bodies. They are globally important in the freshwater ecosystem as they serve as the base of many food webs. Here, eukaryotic algae is categorized into 5 classes. In the first class is the Rhodophyceae, or the class of red algae, which are abundant in marine habitats and rarely occur in freshwater. Batrachospermum is an example of which. This organism can be found in heavily shaded streams and springs, and their red coloration is attributed with the presence of phycoerythrins in its system. The next class is the Chrysophyceae, and this class of golden algae, like that of Dinobryon, are mixotrophic organisms, being both hetero and autotroph. They also ingest inorganic particles as a source of nutrients. They occur in the photic zone of the lakes and ponds and become abundant during summer. The class Bacillariophyceae, or diatoms, serve as primary producers in freshwater ecosystems. They become abundant during the spring season in oligotrophic and mesotrophic lakes. And one key characteristic that they have are silica flocule, or glass cell wall, as seen in this symbella. Trivia time! Do you know that diatoms are used in forensic cases to determine how the person died? Yes, the more you know. The class Dinophyceae is found in lakes, wetlands, ponds, and estuaries. And their group consists of unicellular free-swimming organisms. And some organisms form a symbiotic relationship with this group. And however, some species included in this group are toxic to humans, like that of Piphiestera physicida. The class of euglenoids or Euglenophyceae are described as pigmented autotrophs as seen in the photographs. They commonly occur in lakes and rivers with eutrophic conditions. That is why the presence of euglenoids in water can be attributed to it being eutrophic. Now the last class of algae is the Chlorophyceae, and this class includes simple unicellular to complex multicellular organisms, as it is deemed the most diverse group of freshwater algae. These organisms are located on benthic zones of streams and lakes, and are commonly occurring in eutrophic habitats. As an example, we use Eustrum here, or commonly known as desmid, that indicates unpolluted water. The next group of organisms that are included in this domain are the protozoans. Generally, these predators regulate the population of bacteria in aquatic environments. And here, we categorize them based on their locomotory organs. The first category are flagellated protozoans, which are organisms that utilize flagella for their movement. One known example of which is trypanosomes. And a little fact, this parasitic protozoan causes trypanosomiasis in humans. Next is the amoeboid protozoans, which are the largest described group of protozoa. For movement, they use their pseudopodia or false feet to move from place to place. A common microbe that exhibits this movement is amoeba, which we all had seen in the lab. This organism can be located in benthic zones of lakes and rivers. The last category are ciliated protozoans. From what they are called, they use their locomotory organ cilia to assist in their movement and dispersion. And included in this category are free-swimming organisms of the genus Paramecium. Aside from predating bacteria, they also feed in algae and detritus, or decomposed matter. Now let's move on to the fungi group. And fungi, as we know, dwell in terrestrial habitats, although there are few species that can live in aquatic habitats. These organisms are necessary in degrading leaf litter, debris, and other dead matter that enters the streams and lakes. And included in this group are slime molds, filamentous fungi, column fungi, algal fungi, and imperfect fungi, like the genus Helicodendron. These organisms occur on partially decayed and submerged leaves of angiosperms. Here we have Dermatocarpon luridum, or the Brooks stippleback lichen, as an example of aquatic lichen. This species grows on rocks in lakes, streams, and rivers. And moreover, Brooks stippleback lichen occasionally occur in benthic zones. And a little fact, lichens are formed in association with ascomycete fungi and algae. They follow? Okay, good, good. Now that we're done discussing microbes, let us now head on to plants. And question, who here have gone to rivers or lakes? Okay, good, good. Then, have you observed aquatic plants there? Not really, eh? If that's the case then, I will introduce you to some known species of macrophytes or aquatic plants. And to start off, these plants are essential for the biodiversity of freshwater organisms. Yes, essential, because they serve as breeding ground, shelter, and food for aquatic organisms. Although, at times, their number becomes a problem, as they can interrupt the flow of water in water systems. And here, we divided them into two categories, namely the nonvascular and vascular plants. Let us first talk about the bryophytes under the category of nonvascular plants. Bryophytes are abundant in some freshwater systems, and in terms of taxonomy, bryophytes are divided into three orders, namely Spagnales, Andreales, and Bryales. And in this slide, we can see Sphagnum cristatum or a sphagnum moss. This dominates shallow acidic waters of peatbogs and high-latitude wetlands. Not to mention, this genera is highly important in the carbon cycle globally. Another order of bryophytes is the order Bryales. Fontinalis antipyretica, or the common water moss, is a member of this order. This species is found in the littoral zones of lakes and rivers. They can also occur in benthic zones. Yes, As a matter of fact, this was seen 120 meters deep in Crater Lake located in the US. As compared to the first two orders mentioned, the order Andreales have very few members of aquatic species. And what we have as an example here is the genus Andrea, or commonly known as rock moss. As stated in the name, this moss occurs in rocks situated near the waters of lakes and streams. Now let's move on to the other category, which is the vascular plants. The flowering plants or angiosperms are the dominant aquatic vascular plants in the littoral zone. Angiosperms are divided into two, the eudicots and monocots, with the latter being much abundant in aquatic habitats. Included also in vascular plants are ferns and fern allies, with some species truly associated in inhabiting aquatic ecosystems. Aquatic vascular plants are divided into four categories, and we will discuss them one by one. And first on the list is the unattached macrophyte. This macrophyte floats, and its roots are not anchored into the substrate. An example of this is Pistia striatotus, or water lettuce, which is found in lakes and rivers. The next category are the attached macrophytes. Similar with the unattached aquatic plants, they are able to float too. However, their roots are embedded in the substrate. An example of this is Nymphaea or water lilies, and I believe we all know this one. This is often talked about in news when referring to rivers, right? Well, let's move on to the next slide. Submersed or submerged plants. These aquatic plants have their whole life cycle occurring underwater, except the flowering event. The same with attached plants. Their roots are also anchored to the sediment of aquatic habitats, and the example given here is Hydrilla verticillata, or commonly known as hydrilla, which is found in littoral and benthic zones of lakes and rivers. The last on our list is the emergent aquatic plant. And this type of plant grows in soils up to a water depth of 1.5 meters. Unlike the attached and unattached macrophytes, emergent macrophytes produce aerial leaves like that of Tipha latifolia or the broadleaf cattail.
Animals. As compared to marine species, freshwater animals have to undergo and weather a different set of environmental variables, such as more extreme temperature fluxes, close proximity to terrestrial ecosystems and human habitations, and a much smaller area to thrive and proliferate in. This has led to differing adaptations among many freshwater organisms, even if they have similar cousins in the ocean. Select your preferred group. Phylum Porifera, or the sponges. Many are familiar of the sponges found in the ocean, but few know that they exist in freshwater bodies too. Spongilla lacustris, or the freshwater sponges, are found at the bottom of many lakes, ponds, or slow-moving streams. Since lakes are more vulnerable to colder temperatures in the winter, freshwater sponges have a dormant stage known as gemmules, which are highly tolerant to freezing, oxygen deprivation, and even desiccation. Once the environment is favorable, the gemmules grow once again and disperse in a form of asexual reproduction for the sponge. They also form a symbiotic relationship with green algae, hence their green-coated color. They are known to filter feed and are preyed upon by caddisflies and spongefly larvae. Phylum Cnidaria Future 1, the Hydra. These are freshwater cnidarians found at the bottom of lakes, commonly attached to a hard substrate. Using their dermatocysts on their tentacle structures, they paralyze their favorite prey, copepods and larvae. When swimming horizontally, they perform a cartwheel to move. Should they wish to move up or down the lake, however, they must form and control an air bubble. Phylum Cnidaria, Feature 2, Craspedacusta sorbi, the freshwater jellyfish. Jellyfishes are found in lakes as well, though they don't differ much from their marine brethren. In fact, it is believed that these jellyfishes are invasive to freshwater bodies, and that this species had originally hailed from the seas and oceans. They are usually found farther from the shore, near the surface. Phylum Platyhelminthes, Feature 1, Microstomum sp. This specific genus of flatworm is found on the surface or near surface of lakes. They are primarily omnivores, and on occasion are detritivores as well. In fact, they are known to ingest hydra and use to assimilate their nidocysts for its own use, such as protection or predation. Phylum Platyhelminthes, Feature 2, Dugitia sp. More known as the planarians, these flatworms are normally found in the upstream portions of rivers. They are famous for their ability to regenerate their bodies. Even when cut in half, or even in quarters, each portion will regenerate into a new planarian flatworm. The presence of some of these species can indicate that a freshwater ecosystem is healthy. They are usually carnivorous and detritivorous. Phylum Platyhelminthes, Feature 3, Schistosoma sp. An infamous creature, the blood fluke is known to be one of the most common parasites of humans. Commonly found in the littoral zones of lakes, they first infect snails, their intermediate hosts, and then humans, their definitive hosts. Should you swim in a lake full of schistosoma-infected snails, you are likely to come back out with schistosomiasis. They have more devastating effects to humans rather than lake ecosystems. Error, error, error. Section missing. Please select another category.
This common microorganism is the Deloid rotifer. The little guy can be found in nearly any body of water, often hanging out at the bottom where the substrate is. They have gained the ability to survive through a drought through cryptobiosis, where it changes into a form of extreme inactivity. Rotifers often eat detritus, algae, bacteria, and protozoa. They are hunted by shrimps, aquatic insects, and as well as some birds. Found in either the benthos region of lakes or in the riverbed, this is one example of a roundworm that makes up the phylum Nematoda. This section, however, is still under the process of generating more information. Found in the benthic region of lakes and rivers, the Gordius robustus, or horsehair worm of the phylum Nematophora, is a parasitic organism that waits in the water for a host to infect, and, once it enters into a host system, it completely eats through the abdomen, lengthening as it matures. Eventually, it exits the body and returns to a body of water where it will lay its eggs for the next cycle to begin. Those that belong to the phylum Mollusca are characterized as having an unsegmented, soft body, with most having a mantle that excretes a calcareous shell. Snails and slugs make up the class Gastropoda. These animals can generally be found in the benthic zone of all bodies of water to the superlittoral region. To feed, Snails and slugs are able to create a water current to collect food particles, which can come into the form of detritus, periphyton, and macrophytes, among others. One more thing before we move on, snails are also one of the most common intermediate hosts for parasites. Good for the parasites, not so much for the snails though. Zebra mussels can be found in the slow-moving benthic zones of streams, lakes, and rivers. They can easily adapt to different temperatures and this species in particular is notorious for being highly invasive. Zebra mussels are capable of increasing the dissolved phosphorus and clarity of the water it inhabits. This would also increase the macrophytes of their habitat and decrease planktonic production, negatively impacting the native species present. This will result in a shift in the food web of the freshwater system. Monitoring lake and river systems for these kinds of invasion is important to uphold and conserve the current ecosystems. The phylum Annelida, known for having species with segmented bodies and specialized digestive systems. Some species are hermaphroditic, able to sexually reproduce, while others can also reproduce asexually through budding. Leeches are blood-sucking animals that use a posterior sucker to attach to their host to better anchor themselves for feeding. Where the bite is, the leech injects an anticoagulant in order for the blood to continuously flow. They are capable of surviving without any food for more than 2 years, so be careful the next time you plan to tread shallow lakes and rivers. You may end up being the parasite's next meal. However, they don't just suck on blood, they also eat midge larvae, amphipods, and mollusks to name a few. In the benthos of lakes and rivers, you can find the species Aeolosoma, which has specialized appendages to better filter feed on fine organic matter. Despite this, they are also omnivorous predators. Most bryozoans live in marine waters. However, one class does live in fresh water, the Phylactolemmata. These animals are abundant in lentic or lake systems, which often causes clogging in water treatment pipes. They also have small resistant structures called statoblasts, which aid them in surviving harsh conditions as well as for dispersal. Entoprocta, while most are marine, has 2 species that live in fresh water. One example is shown here, the Urnatella gracialis, that can be found in the benthic region of lakes and marine waters. These animals reproduce both asexually and sexually once a year. Oh, what do we have here? A surprise appearance from the tardigrade itself. Tardigrades, lovingly called water bears, are a common sight in marine and lake benthos, but can generally be found in any aquatic system, regardless of its extreme conditions. These tiny animals are considered extremophiles because of their capability to change into an inactive form when conditions are not well suited for them, such as during droughts, large changes in temperatures, and highly saline waters.
Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Chelicerata, Feature 1, Dolomidis sp. Known as the fishing spider, these arachnids have minuscule hydrophobic hairs all around their body, allowing them to float on the water surface, and even create water bubbles when they need to briefly go underwater. These hairs can also feel the water vibrations, giving them enhanced capabilities to hunt. To catch their prey, such as small fish, they enrapture them using all their legs and secrete a venom to paralyze their food. They are found on the littoral zones of lakes near the shore and thrive in calmer waters. Any more turbulence in their hunting ground or water would impede their spider senses. They are primarily nocturnal and are commonly snacks to large birds and spider wasps. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Chelicerata, Feature 2, Argyroneta aquatica. Known as the diving bell spider, this is the only known arachnid to fully live underwater. Their abdomen contains multiple fine, hydrophobic hairs that allow them to create water bubbles as they submerge. They collect these bubbles into a larger air reserve and web it up, creating their own scuba tank or diving bell underwater, which removes their need to surface after every dive. However, because of this, they can only thrive in the littoral zone, where plants, home of their improvised air sources, are found. Due to their ingenuity, these spiders are apex masters of their zone and niche, allowing them to hunt benthic larvae and other small fish that other spiders or semi-aquatic predators couldn't reach. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Chelicerata, Feature 3, Tetragnatha sp. The long-jawed orb weavers are the renowned master architects of webs. While not aquatic species at all, they strategically place webs on top of the relatively faster-moving midstream portions of rivers, allowing them to catch various jumping or flying prey, such as invertebrates, that may fall victim to their masterful traps. This makes them important predators of the food web of rivers. Subphylum Pancrustacea. More commonly known as the insects, Pancrustacea comprises at least 13 major orders of organisms found in freshwater bodies. A large number of the organisms here spend their immature stages in the water before leaving the aquatic life during maturity. For organisms that undergo metamorphosis that is complete, their young is called a larva, while for those with incomplete metamorphosis, their young is known as a nymph. A common feature among all these organisms is that they have three major body regions: a head, thorax, and abdomen, a pair of antennae, compound eyes during maturity, and three pairs of legs, or 6 individual legs. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Colembola. The springtails. These small invertebrates are no longer considered insects. A hydrophobic body allows them to stay on the water surface, but due to their size, they prefer calmer waters such as the margins of rivers, lest they risk being washed away. They possess an organ on their abdomen known as a furcula, which, when triggered, allows them to use them as a spring and jump, which they do when threatened or wish to migrate to better waters. Springtails are good indicators on whether a lake or its soil is healthy. They break down organic matter and have diverse and adaptable diets, from leaf litter to rotifers, depending on their environment. Hence, when the lake environment becomes unbearable, they can also undergo ecdysis, or they shrink their bodies. This is to save energy. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Ephemeroptera. The mayflies. These beautiful invertebrates actually do not eat and die within days of maturity, and most of their life is spent as nymphs. These young mayflies are distinguished by 3 long filaments on their posterior end and conspicuous gills on their abdomen. The nymphs are collectors. Therefore, they primarily filter feed or graze on rocks for food on the periphyton, such as algae. Hence, they prefer to stay in the upstream or midstream, where their food is more present. The nymph of mayflies, along with the stoneflies and caddisflies, are all good indicators of stream water quality. A higher diversity of the species found in an area indicates cleaner waters. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Odonata. The dragonflies and damselflies. Present even before the dinosaurs began to roam, these insects are famous sights in streams and lakes. In their adult phases, they possess their signature long, segmented abdomens, two pairs of wings, and large compound eyes. However, like many lake insects, most of their lives are spent as nymphs underwater. These young dragonflies are found midstream, where the water is not too strong and where they serve as predators to smaller invertebrates. To hunt efficiently, they possess a signature labia, a hinged organ that helps it grasp and catch prey. As if that weren't enough, they also already possess the compound eyes of their adult stage. Error, error, error. Section missing. Please select another category. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Plecoptera. The stoneflies. While the adults are particularly unique and pretty, they only live for 1 to 4 weeks. They spend most of their life as larvae in the upstream portions of rivers and are characterized by having two posterior appendages, flattened bodies, and less conspicuous gills. They play a particularly important role here. They are known as shredders, since they break down the leaves, pollen, and larger detritus, known as coarse particulate organic matter or CPOM, into fine particulate organic matter or FPOM. The latter is an important energy reserve for those midstream and downstream. Together with the mayflies and caddisflies, a higher diversity of these organisms indicate good stream water quality. This is because stoneflies primarily prefer highly oxygenated rivers. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Hemiptera. Feature 1, Lethocerus americanus. Known as the giant water bug or the toe biter, this giant bug prefers to stay at the littoral zone of lakes. They possess specialized appendages, one on their abdomen to collect oxygen so that the rest of their body can remain submerged, and two specialized front appendages to rapture prey. As with many hemipterans, they possess a rostrum that secretes digestive juices, liquefying their prey for their consumption. This makes them dangerous predators of many species, including other invertebrates, tadpoles, snails, and even small fish. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Hemiptera. Feature 2, Lacotrephes sp. Known as the water scorpion for their unique tail, they are actually unrelated to their fearsome terrestrial namesake. Their long tail actually serves as a breathing tube to collect oxygen when they are submerged, and this air is stored in a space between their abdomen and wings. They possess two raptorial front appendages and a proboscis as well, which makes them compete for the same niche in the littoral zone as the giant water bug. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Hemiptera. Feature 3. Hesperocorixa castanea. The water boatman. These insects trap air inside an area between its body and wings, allowing it to breathe underwater. Their legs possess a feather-like appearance, which resembles the oars of boats, hence their name. They are primarily herbivorous and use their rostrum to break down and digest plants and leaf litter, so they prefer to stay in the littoral zone. Hence, they are also important prey for large invertebrates and fishes of the lakes. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Hemiptera. Feature 4. Geris lacustris, the water strider. A famous sight in lakes, famous for their ability to walk, run, and stride on the water surface. Their legs possess fine hydrophobic microhairs. When coupled with their narrow body and leg structure, this allows them to keep the water's surface tension. Additionally, these fine hairs also serve as a radar for ripples should they wish to hunt prey. Hence, they are important predators to smaller invertebrates, but are also prey to various birds, fish, and larger invertebrates that can catch up to them. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Neuroptera. The netwings have a characteristic translucent and venated wings, earning them their names. However, most are terrestrial, and only one species' larvae is found underwater, Sisera nigra, the sponge fly. Their larvae live at the limnetic zone, far from the shores, and sometimes travel to the benthos to feed on freshwater sponges. It is because of this that they earn their name as well. In their second and third instar larvae stages, they develop conspicuous gills to adapt to this aquatic lifestyle. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Megaloptera. The Addis flies, fish flies, and Dobson flies. Corydalus cornutus, or the eastern Dobson fly, is an example of a megalopteran. Their short-lived adults are famous for their large mandibles used for finding mates. However, their larvae are known predators of rivers and are usually found midstream to downstream. They possess spiracles, which let them breathe on both land and water, and possess prolegs on their abdomen, which helps anchor themselves from the currents. Uniquely, the pupa of all megalopterans are motile and possess mandibles capable to defend themselves. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Trichoptera. The caddisflies. Similar to many aquatic insects, their adults are short-lived, and their larvae are much more famous in the aquatic world. They are well known for their capacity to use silk, a tool made famous by spiders and caterpillars, to glue together scavenged pebbles, rocks, twigs, leaves, and other materials to create their own home. This helps protect them from predators. These larvae are shredders and break down algae and detritus into finer matter for those in the downstream, and therefore they reside in the upstream parts of the river. Other upstream caddisflies use their silk to make nets to catch food moving through the currents. However, some caddisfly larvae do not make such elaborate homes or catches, and are simply free-living. These are largely predators and live primarily downstream. Along with the stoneflies and mayflies, a large diversity value of caddisflies indicate good water quality. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Lepidoptera. The famous butterflies and moths. Almost all of the species here, whether adult or larvae, are terrestrial. However, the larvae of Bellura gortinoides, or the white-tailed diver, is semi-aquatic and feed on algae and certain aquatic plants. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Coleoptera. The order of the great Hercules and the shining scarab beetles. However, only 3% of them are found in aquatic habitats, such as Discus marginalis, or the great diving beetle. Similar to the hemipterans, they take air from the surface and trap it in between their abdomen and elytra so that they can submerge. They also possess modified hind limbs to help them maneuver in the aquatic environment. Both the larvae and adults of the great diving beetle are carnivorous and are capable of hunting newts, tadpoles, and even small fishes. Hence, they are likely to stay between the littoral and limnetic zones. However, the adults of other diving beetles are primarily herbivorous. Hence, these would prefer to stay in the littoral zone. Error, error, error. Section missing. Please select another category. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Diptera, Family Culicidae. The infamous mosquitoes. While their adults are known for their blood diets and their parasitic tendencies, their larvae are commonly found in stagnant waters in both littoral and limnetic zones. These young mosquitoes possess spiracles or siphons to breathe in air and feed on algae and bacteria on the surface. Therefore, they thrive in unclean waters where bacteria is high and their predators are low. The larvae are huge sources of food for many lake organisms, but their adults are infamous spreaders of pathogens and are known to suck the blood of many other vertebrates as well. Phylum Arthropoda, Subphylum Pancrustacea, Order Diptera, Family Chauboridae. Known as the phantom midges or glassworms, the antennae of both adults and larvae are unique. Adults possess a unique feather-like antenna, while larvae have modified antennae which serve as appendages for grasping food. They are mostly transparent as camouflage against many predators, and the larvae primarily feed on plankton.
Phylum Chordata, home of the vertebrate animals. While we are excited to present to you the fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals of the lakes and rivers, we would like to inform you that this section is undergoing heavy construction. Hence, only simplified categories are available. Come back soon to see more of them in detail. In the meantime, please select a chordate category. Fishes, the poster species of many aquatic ecosystems. There are over 24,000 to 28,000 species of them, and a little less than half of that inhabit the freshwater bodies. Of that, over 3,000 live in the Amazonian waters. Can you imagine the diversity and evolution these fishes have gone through? Freshwater fishes have an incredibly different environment as compared to saltwater. Those fishes living in marine environments have to deal with the huge amounts of salt around them, so they have to drink more water and excrete incredibly salty urine to counter the loss of water in their body. Freshwater fishes, on the other hand, don't need to drink as much water, since they passively still absorb water through their skin. However, their urine is more diluted. One type of freshwater fish are known as the anadromous fish. Those that are born in freshwater bodies migrate to the seas and oceans to mature and swim back upstream in order to spawn. Some of these famous fish include the salmon, bass, lamprey, and the sturgeon. Opposite to the anadromous fish are the catadromous fish. These organisms are born in the ocean, swim upwards to the river until they mature, and finally swim back downstream into the ocean to spawn. You can tell that, since they go upstream to grow, their diet is large and voracious. When still small, they eat small invertebrates and snails, but as they grow larger, they can even eat other fish and small birds. You may recognize the eel, one of the most famous catadromous organisms. Various fish in streams and lakes have different morphologies suited to their needs too. Those fish that wait to ambush their prey are shaped like a torpedo, with pointed snouts and posterior fins so that they can catch and clasp prey incredibly fast, just like the alligator gar. Other fish who are active predators must have streamlined bodies in order to be faster than their prey, just like the red salmon. Fish who hunt in riverbeds or the lake bentos have flattened bodies, more like barbels or whiskers, and may lack a swim bladder, also that they can sense and feed better on the bed, just like the catfish or koi fish. Other fish who hunt on the surface have flattened heads and large eyes to help them spot prey easier, just like the three-spotted gourami. A unique and special feature. Sardiniella tawilis, or the freshwater sardine, known as the only freshwater sardine in the entire world, is endemic to the Philippines and only found in Lake Taal and Batangas. They are filter feeders and swim near the surface for any plankton that they happen to come upon, swimming with their mouths open and using their gill rakers to filter their food. Notably, they are also capable of ingesting copepods and rotifers as well, allowing for a more diverse diet. Tawilis is also known as a delicacy in the country, and a high demand for them has caused their populations to plummet, leading the IUCN to label them as endangered. If that wasn't enough, the recent 2020 Lake Taal eruption has disrupted their populations even further. With that in mind, it is time to act now to raise awareness, help research, and preserve our tawilis. Tetrapods, the amphibians. A wide group consisting of salamanders, caecilians, toads, and frogs, these creatures are found nearly anywhere a freshwater body is found. From streams to lakes, from the beds to the surface, there's always a mark of amphibians. Their young, such as the tadpoles of frogs and the efts of salamanders, feed on algae, plant matter, and smaller invertebrates, but are also large source of food for fish and other large invertebrates. The adults are largely predators and hunt smaller invertebrates. Due to their sensitivity to disturbances and pollution, amphibians are good indicators of lake or river health as well. A large number of reptiles, mammals, and birds live, thrive, or visit the freshwater bodies. However, a detailed portion of this area is still under construction. Lake Strange is in the process of collecting samples for these bodies, but it is difficult since many of these species are endangered or are already extinct. Researchers and organizers of Lake Strange are hard at work at restoring the populations of these species and other areas. And, if possible, one day we will have them here. Most of these organisms prefer to stay in the shallower portions of lakes and rivers as they do not possess gills or mechanisms of breathing underwater. Due to their size, they are largely apex predators of their domains. Some examples include manatee, turtles, and fearsome freshwater crocodiles and alligators.
From here we shall discuss the general concepts pertaining to biodiversity. First of all, what brings about diversity? That is evolution. Evolution is the primary driving factor for diversity. Now, evolution contains two overarching factors, which is the time needed for evolution and reproductive isolation. With these two factors coming into play in the freshwater environment, it would result into millions of new species if the opportunity allows the gradual changes. Time is a very important variable for evolution, and this is best shown when observing geologically ancient locations. One would notice a high number of species in a single location. This is because they had enough time for new species to arise in just that habitat. Species that have such restricted distribution in an area are called endemic species. These types of habitats, such as ancient lakes, are usually excellent waters for adaptive radiation, where organisms rapidly diversify from an ancestral species to brand new forms. Speaking of ancient lakes, with how varied the climate was back from long ago, there came a point when some of these lakes were covered with ice during the Ice Age. Most species could not survive in environments this frigid, but that makes it more likely for the habitat to exhibit high endemism. Lake inhabitants were presented with numerous changes in their geographically isolated environments through a very long period of time. And through that period, variations in water levels, formation, and isolation of subbasins and fluvial processes resulted in the divergence and evolution of new species. One primary cause of divergence and evolution of new species is reproductive isolation of a population. Reproductive isolation is when species become distinct enough through evolution so that they cannot interbreed with the population that they diverged from. An example of this is amphipods from Lake Baikal in Russia. It can be seen here how they diversified in body form, showing different lengths among one another. On the next slide, we see the distinction between body forms hailing from just a single family, Cichlidae. This is one good example of how rapid evolution could be in temperate habitats. Now that we have discussed how species interact with the environment, let us talk more about the environment itself. The habitat has numerous factors that come into play when explaining how it affects diversity. One such factor is the habitat type. The habitat type serves as the template on what type of evolution would take place. Any changes in the habitat, whether it might be big or small, could lead to increases or decreases in the biodiversity. And it is up to the organism to adapt to what they specialize in, depending on the habitat type. Another factor is the scale. Scale is important because it helps determine patterns in diversity in the habitat, such as microbes having a relationship with other small particles, to beavers reacting to the changes in water levels in their freshwater habitat. The interface between habitats is another vital factor. There will always be overlaps between two habitats, and these overlaps usually have a high number of species that are adapted to both types of habitat. Dispersal ability is an important determinant of the distribution of species and its diversity. Freshwater species that are widely distributed, for example, have multiple adaptations relating to their dispersal ability. They have stages in their life history that are resilient during their transportable life stage form. They can reproduce during their transportable life stage, and they can survive in new habitats to either avoid predation, handle competition, and forage for food. Finally, space. Space, much like the four factors here, is also an important determinant of diversity. Space can let us know the distance of colonies to their new habitats, which eventually succession will take place upon their arrival. Early succession species on newly formed habitats reproduce rapidly and disperse widely, but the diversity is low because they are the only ones there, the colonists. Fast forwarding to the late succession species. Species are more competitive for resources and they drive out the early colonists. But the consequence is that diversity is also low because the only dominant competitors remain in the habitat. Only in the middle of the period of succession will the diversity be high because both early and late species are present and coexisting. Genetic diversity is important for long-term viability because it tells that the organism can potentially be highly adaptable to environmental changes. It can potentially increase survival against climate change, disease outbreaks, and other causes of mass death. Mutation is the primary cause of genetic diversity. It is maintained through persistent immigration, environmental variability, and continuous mutation. This is especially important for fish and other invertebrates, as genetic diversity will protect their long-term viability, as well as keeping genes for future generations to have resistance to disease. But in case organisms had their numbers cut down in population size, conservationists try their best to keep rare species within or above the minimum viable population. This is the calculated bare minimum for a species to persist in the wild while accounting for extinction. And along with that, the effective population size also comes into play, where it is the fraction of the actual population that contributes genes to the succeeding generation. If a population goes past the minimum viable population threshold, there will be a stochastic probability that the population will survive in the long term. The extinction vortex explains that the lower the population, extinction susceptibility becomes higher, exponentially increasing the odds of the population being wiped out. Moving on, climate change can also alter biodiversity with factors such as temperature change, precipitation, annual timing, and intensity. Climate change could also benefit invasive organisms. Snakeheads, for example, they are a species that tolerate cold and warm temperatures from 0 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius. And they also have a wide range in dispersion, which makes them effective invasive species, especially taking advantage of global warming. Anthropogenic activity potentially has the most harmful effect with species diversity. Humans are known to introduce species where they did not used to be, may it be intentional or not. Species introduction is the most permanent form of pollution, but less recognizable in global change. Eradicating newly established species is almost impossible, and the best way to control or prevent this, for example, is to control aquatic pests as soon as they get introduced. The Moylan Light conceptual model shows the generalized concepts in invasive fish species establishment. First, most invader species fail to establish. Second, successful invaders establish without major effects on ecosystem and community. Third, all aquatic systems can be invaded. Fourth, low diversity systems have the most apparent effects in their communities, such as islands and highly disturbed habitats. Fifth, higher trophic level invaders such as predators can greatly affect communities compared to lower trophic level invaders. Sixth, invaders are likely to establish when native species are disturbed. 7. Invaders' success depends on environmental variability, like how the invaders will adapt to their new habitat. 8. Stable systems can be susceptible to invasions. 9. The more invaders are in number and the more times they get introduced, the more likely they are to establish successfully. The invaders persist in a given habitat. Eventually, there may be a chance that some species will go extinct at the expense of the other species. Humans are likely to be the cause for a big part of extinction events in the past century. Freshwater habitats are hit hard because of the impacts that humans cause, draining waste from the landscape to freshwater ecosystems. It's even worse if it's drained upstream from a river. Then it would most likely affect the rest of the water downstream. The extinction rates are so bad that evolution of freshwater organisms could not keep up, making endemic species very susceptible to this threat. That is why endemic species are given great focus for conservation. And in order to effectively conserve the threatened species, one must understand their ecology to know the proper procedures in identifying their ecosystem structure and stressors. And only then will they be able to perform conservation attempts such as managing competing invasive species. Processes such as decomposition and nitrogen cycling play part in microbes, plants, and animals in an aquatic ecosystem. And potential disturbances such as invasive species, pollution, habitat destruction, and climate change could be some stressors that would threaten this ecosystem. Despite all this knowledge, conservation efforts are still hit or miss in freshwater systems because watersheds integrate in large areas. From that, conservationists have various approaches to measure the species diversity in a given area, to which we will briefly go over. Species richness is the simplest measure, as it uses the taxonomic units or the total number of species per area. Species evenness measures the abundance between species in a community. A high evenness means that the species numbers between habitats are more evenly distributed. Shannon index can measure both richness and evenness. This is known as diversity richness. From here, these aspects can be used in the measurement of diversity. And this acts as the first step for conservationists to quantify if the aquatic environment has high diversity or not.
Yo! That's like so lit talaga. And Stark Foundation pa nag-fund?
Uy, ako naman. Paano ba to?
Dami kong natutunan pa. Sheesh! Sana dumami pa mga ganitong museums natin dito, broski.
Uy, patulong naman dito.
Ay, sorry.